Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. I am Deborah Hoover, President and CEO of the Burton D. Morgan Foundation. I'm so happy to be here with you today and to welcome you to this important panel on entrepreneurship and the millennial generation. According to the Kauffman Foundation's February 2015 State of Entrepreneurship Address, millennials, born roughly between the years 1981 and 2000, have created fewer and fewer businesses since they entered the workforce. Despite expressing strong interest in entrepreneurship and having been exposed more than any other previous generation to entrepreneurial training. Also, according to the Kauffman Foundation, fully 2/3 of our higher education institutions now offer entrepreneurship programming on their campuses. That adds up to more than 2,000 colleges and universities in the United States. Entrepreneurship education appears to be thriving on campuses, largely in response to student demand for this type of opportunity. Indeed, most colleges and universities in our Northeast Ohio region have entrepreneurship programs. Entrepreneurship directors, many of whom are here today from more than 20 institutions, are currently members of the Jumpstart Higher Education Collaboration Council. Yet the percentage of graduates starting their own businesses after college sits around 16%. Students cite lack of financial support and resource support as two of the primary reasons they do not take the leap, despite the fact that 3/4 of them affirmatively state that they are interested in pursuing a venture. So why are we failing to move the needle? Where is the disconnect? And of importance to Northeast Ohio, how do we encourage millennials not only to start, but also to grow their businesses here in our region? So to help us explore these important questions, we have three wonderful panelists with us today. Andrew Yang, to my left, is a serial entrepreneur, the author of Smart People Should Build Things, and the founder and CEO of Venture for America, a nonprofit organization that links entrepreneurial millennials with startups across our country, including here in Northeast Ohio. And Andrew will be honored this coming Monday at the White House as a presidential ambassador for global entrepreneurship. And then applause. And then to Andrew's left, we have Dr. Scott Shane. He serves as the A. Malachi Mixon III Professor of Entrepreneurial Studies at our own Case Western Reserve University. He is also the author of many books and scholarly articles on entrepreneurship and innovation management. He's a regular contributor to the website entrepreneur.com, writing on such topics as Are Millennials Really the Entrepreneurial Generation? And in full disclosure, Dr. Sheen has been selected as the first fellow at the Burton D. Morgan Foundation for our fellowship program housed in our newly created Research Institute. And last, but certainly not least, is Lena Kelly. And we can't have a discussion here without having a millennial representative. She is a Venture for America fellow working for BoxCast, a high-tech startup located in downtown Cleveland. She's a graduate of Washington University, and she hails from Los Angeles, has spent summers at Google, Epson, and Answers.com. And despite the weather in Cleveland, Lena is now an enthusiastic Buckeye. And she wrote in a Crane's Cleveland blog post recently, more than anything, the people are what makes this city so wonderful. There's a palpable sense of pride when you walk through the streets. So thank you, Lena. So we'd like to hear off just some opening remarks from our panelists. So Andrew, would you like to start and tell us a little bit about the Venture for America story, please?
Sure. I started Venture for America to try and address the issues that plagued me as a young entrepreneur. I started my first company when I was 25. And I did that after going to law school. How many people here might have gone to law school? I'm sure there are a few lawyers here. So I graduated from Brown in the mid-'90s with an economics degree, didn't know what to do, and so I went to law school, which might also describe some of the people that had their hands up. And I found that law school clarified very little, and so I became, I became a corporate attorney at a Wall Street firm, and I was there for about 5 months, and I thought that it would be better to somehow try and build something as opposed to doing the documentation for someone else trying to build something. So I started a company, and it had its mini rise and maximum fall during the first dot-com bubble, which many of you remember. And so I experienced firsthand just how hard it is to start a business in your mid-20s. So if we're here to talk about encouraging entrepreneurship among millennials, we should know we're trying to encourage them to take on an incredibly daunting challenge, which is to start a business. So the way I learned and developed was that I worked for more experienced entrepreneurs for 5 years, and then I became the CEO of an education company that was acquired by the Washington Post in 2009. But that arc took me the better part of 10 years. And so one of the other themes that we try and do with Venture for America is pair aspiring entrepreneurs with more experienced mentors and leaders so they can develop the same way I learned. And then also support them when they decide to try and start a business. So here in Cleveland, we have 12 fellows, including, raise your hand if you're a Venture for America fellow. Awesome. So if you don't know these people, yeah, let's give them a round of applause. So as Deb described, there's this massive desire and willingness to develop in this direction. But then there's actually a bit of a gulf, certainly after school ends. I've talked to leaders at entrepreneurship student organizations around the country, and most of them are stressed out about getting a job after they graduate. I mean, they're not thinking like, hey, what company am I going to start, realistically? A lot of them are trying to get job offers their senior fall, and then they're starting entrepreneurship because it's what excites them intellectually, but the reality is that they want a job after they graduate, and their parents are pushing them in that direction. How many of you all have kids? Yeah, so if you were to imagine yourself, some of you have college-age children, and if they had an offer from an established firm like, let's say, Deloitte, and then they said, hey, I'm considering starting, Andrew.com, you might have some serious second thoughts about Andrew.com, and you might imagine them on your sofa, not that long thereafter. So that's like the reality on the ground. The reality on the ground is that starting a business is incredibly daunting, and that if we want to channel more of our talent in the direction, we have to invest resources to give them a concrete set of steps, so that it's not that when they graduate from school, then there's all of a sudden this leap of faith.
Thank you very much. Scott, would you like to tell us a little about your research, please?
Well, so it's a little bit funny to me to be here and talking about this, because today was the day this week that I put on a tie to go meet with somebody else, as opposed to sitting and talking to students. Now that exams are over, all the student entrepreneurs are looking for money and starting their businesses. And when you get down in the weeds, you say, hi, there's no problem with entrepreneurship. Students are all doing this. It's the same as it's always been. But as an academic, I look at the data. And when you look at the data, you start to see that's not quite true. Some of the patterns aren't as good as they've been for previous generations. And the question is really why. Is it a lack of funding? Is it a change in attitudes? Is it a shift in industries and opportunities? And that's, I think, the big question that the research looks at, is try to figure out why is it that millennials are perhaps not starting businesses at the same rate that their parents' generation and, frankly, their grandparents' generations did when they were the same age.
Thank you. I think there are a lot of nuances, and I think we want to come back to those nuances in a few minutes. So, Lena, could you tell us how you picked VFA to start your postgraduate years here, and how you picked Cleveland as well?
Yeah, definitely. So I graduated from WashU last year. It's been a year, which is crazy. And I studied Spanish and international studies, and I had no idea really what I wanted to do with that, because as Andrew was suggesting, we're kind of pushed into grad school or joining a bank or a consulting firm, and I wasn't so incentivized by the huge checks that are associated with those jobs. And someone suggested Venture for America to me, and the more I learned about it, the more I could see how much I would be able to learn from joining a startup. As someone who didn't necessarily have the direction I thought I was expected to graduate with, getting to put on multiple hats at a startup, to explore kind of what I wanted to do with the next few years of my life, it seemed like a natural step after graduation. And then I found Cleveland through the fellowship. I read about BoxCast and was kind of entranced by the idea that I could help transform the way people communicated. I thought their mission was great. And then came to Cleveland, thought the city was really cool, had never been here before. Definitely different from Los Angeles, but it has its charm. So came, and I moved here in August and have been really happy ever since.
That's great. Thank you. So I have more questions for you, but we'll come back to those. So Andrew, I had the opportunity to go visit one of the other VFA sites last spring. So we went to downtown Las Vegas. And I was very impressed with the energy, in that group of VFA fellows, and learned that they are generating a lot of other ideas, not just the ideas within their startups. So could you talk about the impact that VFA fellows have on the communities where they live and work?
Well, for sure, the goal is to have someone like Lena work with someone like Gordon at BoxCast. And if you don't know Gordon Daly and BoxCast, you should really introduce yourselves immediately, because Gordon to me is one of the templates and paragons of entrepreneurship here in the community. So you learn, so that there's a saying, you can't be what you don't see. And so one of the issues is that we're putting very visible paths and role models for our young people, when really they should be trying to be Gordon and start a business. Certainly we think that would be a phenomenal path for more people like Lena to take. So the goal is to pair the Lenas of the world with the Gordons of the world. And as you said, Deb, certainly task one is for Lena to help grow BoxCast and develop that company and do a good job. But then secondarily, they end up having very positive impacts in the community, and they have their own ideas. 25% of our fellows have actually gone on to start companies at the conclusion of the 2 years in their cities, because if you take really talented, enterprising people and put them with other really talented, enterprising people, then they tend to let their imaginations and energies run wild. Like their workday may end at a certain hour, but then they go home, they talk to their roommate, who's also a young person, who also joined an entrepreneurship apprenticeship program. And so you can imagine what those conversations look like. And you multiply that times the dozens of fellows, both here in Cleveland and other cities, then it's absolutely no mystery that they're starting companies. The issue for us, in my mind, is how to try and enlarge the community that supports that kind of thinking, because most of the world really doesn't. I mean, you get out there again, and Lena can speak to this more so, but entrepreneurship is still sort of seen as kind of a marginal pursuit among many young people on college campuses in terms of people starting. Like they'll, again, love to study it, but if someone says, hey, I'm going to leave school and start a business, then they're seen as very much an outlier. So if we can create the community and enlarge it, then new companies and new ways to contribute will always take shape.
So my understanding of those additional activities that the fellows take on, I mean, they're blended. Some of it's for-profit, and some of it's social venture, and some of it's blended between the two. So Scott, maybe you could talk to us about what you're seeing with the students you speak to, and students who have been part of your research. What is it about the value system and that would send millennials to work and start a venture of their own? What are their priorities that would drive them to do this?
Well, I think actually I'm going to turn that around a little bit and talk about what seems to be going on that's keeping a lot of people from doing that. And I think in a way it's a bit counterintuitive, because as people's attitudes and things that people are interested in broaden and they get interested in more different things, the single-minded focus to start businesses becomes less important and less central to a variety of people. And one of the things that the data shows, when you look at surveys that go back, of college students going back decades, is you see the attitude and interest of people in making a lot of money running their own business declining as importance among college students, and other things becoming more important, doing things of social value, having a happy family, these kinds of questions. Now, one of the things that we need to wrestle with and understand is these trends are good in one respect, because probably we would like people to think that it's important to have a happy family. At the same time, what does that mean when that lack of single-minded focus on building businesses that was present in previous generations is no longer there?
Right. Lena, I think it'd be helpful for our audience to hear from you. I'm sure you and your peers have conversations about these sorts of things. So what do you hear from your peers about their ideas on potentially starting a business either now or in the future?
It's interesting. So this is kind of the first time I've been surrounded by a community where entrepreneurship doesn't have this negative connotation associated with it. I think last year, even at a good school, the notion that you want to do your own thing kind of means you're a lost soul. You're not fitting in with the rest of society, so you're going to start your own venture and probably end up on your parents' couch. So being kind of surrounded by this community where that's no longer the case and we're being encouraged to start our own things and have these conversations has been an entirely different experience. So I'm still new to it because it's kind of switching my mindset. But the creativity that is coming out of, I just have 12 fellows here, but there's 107 people in my class and 100 more in the program. Already that's changing, and it's exciting for me to look to the older fellows who are starting companies. There's an accelerator in Philadelphia. I visited that last week. So I do think we're actively changing that mindset, and hopefully that can start to spread beyond the walls of VFA.
So are you building a community of peers among the other VFA cities and the other VFA fellows?
Definitely. So one of the strengths of the VFA program, I think, is every summer for 5 weeks, every class is brought together at Brown University. And we call it training camp. So from 9 to 6 every day, there are lecturers who come to speak to us about their struggles and their successes. They teach us some coding skills, all the things Andrew has deemed that we need to know before we go out into the entrepreneurial world. But during those 5 weeks, though we are studying a lot, you're building this network that you're talking about. So though I live here and have established amazing friendships here, I have really close friends in Cincinnati and Detroit, Baltimore. So there is this network. Boo, Pittsburgh. No, maybe soon Pittsburgh. It's going to be a city. So now I have friends with a similar mindset all over the country. So it's cool to see how that's spreading.
Well, that's great. I felt that when I was with the fellows last spring.
Yeah.
A very, very dynamic group. So I think that maybe there's a little bit of a disconnect because, and maybe it's just our perception here in Northeast Ohio, but we hear a lot about young entrepreneurs starting businesses, and we also have, say, Mark Zuckerberg is held up as this young entrepreneur, and there's tweets and social media talking all the time about this, Scott. So maybe you would just like to comment on that disconnect between what we read in the media and what's reality.
Well, I think what the data is showing is that we have a decline in the amount of entrepreneurial activity by people who are under 30. That's what the data shows. Now, the thing is that a lot of people who have done this activity have become successful, and the media often likes anecdotes and examples, right? So statistically, we're less likely to have a young entrepreneur starting a successful company today than we did before. Keep in mind that when Steve Jobs was young and of the same age, the media also found him to be a darling and told stories about him doing things at a young age. But the part that to me that's the most troubling is that where there's the biggest decline, about a 50% decline of young college students saying they are interested in starting businesses. Because if the decline is on the interest side, then you need to think about what you're going to do to motivate people, perhaps programs like Venture for America, as opposed to external obstacles like financing or other things, which ironically are easier to solve.
So I just want to try and draw a contrast. Let's say you're a 22-year-old smart young person. You had a couple of choices. So there's this very clear choice called law school that's there for you. Your parents probably think it's a good idea. And you don't have to imagine the idea of law school. You don't have to build it. And if you apply, the government will give you a $100,000 loan, essentially no questions asked. And the acceptance rates to law school are now about over 50%. So if you want to do this, the government will give you $100,000. If you want to start a business, super difficult. Your parents don't think it's a good idea. The government will not give you $100,000. So what we're doing is we're creating a very, very imbalanced equation where certain things we're making very accessible and throwing resources at it, really, because those government loans, we're all paying for them. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I'd much rather pay for this other thing So Venture for America spends about $35,000 per fellow on recruitment, selection, training, placement, programming, and support. And our belief is that that's actually like a really modest investment relative to the potential gains of having someone like Gordon or John Knifick or other people start a company that are going to create dozens of jobs directly, but another possibly like hundreds of jobs indirectly. Since every information economy job creates between 2 and 5 additional jobs among people of varying levels of education, bartenders, hairdressers, landscapers, et cetera, all the way up to nurses, doctors, and teachers. So to us, we have to make legitimate choices for our young people and then invest in them appropriately. Right now, it's like a menu where we're giving them 6 choices and saying, hey, what we really want you to do is the 7th thing. I'm going to hide behind my back. It makes no sense. So what we need to do is we need to put forward the 7th option and the 8th option and the 18th option and say, look, we will make this an appealing path. We will give you the things that you want, which is community, network, training, support, prestige, parental approval. All of those things we will give you if you take on the challenge we want you to take on. So again, but it's not like an idea issue. It's just a resources issue.
So you have lots of applicants these days for these positions within VFA. So how do you know, how do you assess students, and how do you know if they have the right stuff to succeed in the Venture for America Fellows program?
So this year we had 1,600 applications for about 130 spots. So already Venture for America is the equivalent of a very high-end graduate institution in terms of our selectivity. So we look at, and you're always projecting, and you can't be sure, obviously, but we look for people that have demonstrated passion and perseverance and excelled at least at one thing. So if that's school, great. If it's they started businesses and organizations, great. If they were a star athlete, also great. We think that those traits apply themselves to early stage companies, and that the mythology around entrepreneurship as like creativity based, we think is essentially super misleading. The things that you need to succeed at an early stage company are very similar to the things you need to succeed in other contexts. So that's what we screen for. We also screen for character, integrity, purpose driven. We have a no jerks rule, more or less. We think that, you know, because I mean, imagine if you're me and you're going to invest tens of thousands of dollars and like, you know, blood, sweat, and tears in someone, you better like them. I mean, if you don't, then it's going to be a little bit harder to get excited. So I like Lena a great deal. I like so that's how we screen. Obviously, we actually also invested in this psychometric measurement to try and see if we can even suss out who'd make a successful entrepreneur over time. So we're investing in things, and the process, I think, thus far, it's been very high touch, very human.
Great. So Lena, I imagine you will get drawn in to be an ambassador for the program. So now you've been at it for almost a year. What would you tell students who are interested in the program and considering it for their future?
I would be a huge advocate. I can't imagine, and I do talk about this with my roommate and other fellows here, I can't imagine doing anything else where I would have learned so much so quickly. And I still keep in touch with a lot of college friends, and a lot of them have gone on to the roles that they were supposed to go on to. So my college roommate was working at General Mills and was paid a very nice salary. And she was miserable every day. She hated going to work, and I know other people there who are happy, so this is just her situation, but but she said she was basically babysitting a bank account. She wasn't doing anything with it, but if they overspent, she had to notify someone, and if they didn't overspend, then she was kind of looking at a computer screen all day, whereas my day changes minute to minute. I never know what I'm going to do. I have an idea of what I'm going to do when I get to the office, and then by 9:05, that's entirely different. So just the fast-paced working environment is so fun for me. I'm being challenged in ways I didn't see myself being challenged, and kind of seeing opportunities that I didn't know existed 9 months ago. So for anyone who doesn't yet know what they want to do, or who knows that they do want to start a business but doesn't know how to go about doing it, there's no better way to learn than to watch someone else do it, see what they do well, what could improve, and hopefully apply that to my future endeavors.
That's great. So, I mean, it just sounds to me like a phenomenal program, and one that I would have loved to have had the opportunity after college. But Andrew, how do you plan to grow this program in the future? What does that growth trajectory look like?
Well, there's a major documentary that's being filmed on Venture for America right now. It's going to come out next March, so you might see something about that. And we think that will cause an increase in applications from their already lofty heights to something incredible. And so there's clearly this massive desire among our young people. Like the talent is speaking in that they're applying, they want to come have the same sort of experience that Lena and Mukja and others are having. So that's the first input. And then on the other side, there are hundreds of early stage companies here in Northeast Ohio and around the country that would make fantastic development and training grounds for these young people and also be able to harness their talents and energy to grow. So our goal as an organization is to help create 100,000 new US jobs, and we think it's really straightforward how you do it. First, you help supply companies like Decision Desk and BoxCast with the talent and energy they need to grow. So companies need three things broadly to grow: team and talent, financial resources, and product market fit. And we think team and talent's the key driver, because if you have the right people, you can get the money and you can figure out the product market fit. So we help these early stage companies get the talent they need to grow, and then from apprenticing with these entrepreneurs, then our young people will go on to build businesses of their own and create additional opportunities. So we just need to build a bridge to connect those two, and I'm glad to say Venture for America's budget's gone from $200,000 in 2011, most of which was mine, honestly. It was like me and some friends I leaned on and guilt-tripped a little, to about $5 million this year. And we have supporters like Burton D. Morgan Foundation and others that believe in our work. So the potential for Venture for America to create a legitimate choice for our young people is very real, and I think our potential impact is only beginning to be seen.
Great, thank you. So Scott, I want to get back for a minute here to why students might choose not to go the entrepreneurial path. So we've talked some about, parental concern. We're still in a sort of a rough job market. Does student debt play a role in this, in discouraging students to go this route?
Well, I mean, certainly there's a bunch of factors that add on to the basic causes, but I think actually we should get the terminology right when we think about what's down. So when we use the term entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is down by young people, but the reality is that when we talk about entrepreneurship, when we talk about the data, we're talking about people starting businesses. And most businesses that get started are small businesses that stay small. And so what you see in the data is people are less likely to want to own their own small business than previous generation. And I'll ask a question here now, the question that I ask to my students. So I'll ask this of people who look younger than me out here in the group, right? How many of you would like to run a funeral home? Just show your hands. You don't look younger than me, though, but that's all right. How many of you would like to clean septic tanks, have a business cleaning septic tanks? Same person wants both. Okay. The point that I'm trying to address is I didn't see a huge number of hands go up, but those are the kinds of things that in a previous generation of people going out, those were the businesses that were getting started, that people are choosing to do something different now. Okay? And so that's the part we have to understand is, what is it about running your own business when the business itself isn't sexy that is, in fact, less appealing than working for somebody else, in many cases in a business that is sexy. Some of that is that, frankly, running a small business today is less lucrative than it had been before, but some of it is that the status, the relative status of things in people's perceptions is lower now than would have been a generation ago.
And then what about the importance of having a parent or somebody close to you in your family who's been an entrepreneur so that you get to see what that kind of life looks like?
So it's important to be able to see and have some kind of example in seeing that. But one of the things is that, and we don't have great data on this, but it seems that there's no real difference in the decline between people whose parents are entrepreneurs versus those people whose parents were not entrepreneurs, in the kind of generational decline in interest in entrepreneurship. It seems to be something, I guess, a little bit more fundamental than that. Now, having examples, having mentors, having family that's done it, right, all those things will help. It's just that it doesn't seem like that's the primary driver of what makes it possible or makes people interested in doing it.
Okay. Thank you. So this is a question for all three of you. So obviously, you know, Cleveland is in the process of reinventing its economy. Northeast Ohio is reinventing its economy. So how do we attract and keep millennial generation here and encourage them to start businesses that will hopefully thrive and contribute to our economy?
So entrepreneurship's an abstraction. What you really need to focus on are the human beings and the people, really many of whom are here in this room. So I'm going to call out Mukja Altajani, who's a recent transplant here to Cleveland. She graduated from the University of Pennsylvania last year, and in addition to her day job at Good Green, she also started a business, crowdfunded about $10,000 for it, has 30,000 YouTube followers. It's called Natural Club. It's organic hair care products that you subscribe to, and Mukja has great hair, so you can sort of tell that. So if you want to support entrepreneurship, then the question is, what happens to Mukja and her business in the coming months and years? What happens to Mukja's friends who come and visit her? That you have to home in on the human beings and the stories and try and build around the kernels of value, and then show people that starting a company can lead to like incredible things, that Northeast Ohio is a great place to both build a business and have a family and live an incredible life. And so the abstraction really has to give way to the people, the reality on the ground. So if we want to embrace entrepreneurship, we have to embrace Lena, figuratively, of course. Don't all embrace them. That might be a little off-putting. But figuratively embrace the young people that are taking on this challenge, because the reason I started Venture for America is I just remember how freaking hard it was, honestly. You know, and I always feel a little bit funny, you know, being like the sort of the person who's like giving sage wisdom, just because like the builder on the ground really is going through some things that are going to be extraordinarily difficult, and with our support, it's very possible for them to build successful enterprises, but they just need all the help we can give them. And so if you care about it, just like find an early stage company, find an entrepreneur, and freaking like help them in any way that you can.
So, okay, do you two have an answer to that?
Yeah. There are, I guess, two things that have really stuck out to me that I've heard since I've moved to Cleveland about Cleveland. And the first is that there are just two seasons here. There's winter and there's construction season. And so far that has seemed to be true. And the second is that a lot of the people I've met here, like Clevelanders seem to really like to stay here, and there's a lot of great things going on, but they're not necessarily leaving. And a lot of people from the outside world aren't coming here, so there's not really this overlap of people who are able to tell Cleveland's story. And I don't have a fix for that. I think having more people move here who can't, well, all of you have friends who live outside of Cleveland, so convincing them to just visit for a weekend and to kind of see what's going on and be able to go back home and change the perception of Cleveland, that would be a big thing. I've been able to convince some of my friends to come visit me, and so far they've come with a probably, I don't know if it's a negative perception, it's kind of they've never really thought of it. And then leaving here, they are able to say that there is a lot going on here, it is a cool city. So we've been getting great press recently. Cleveland's on all these like places to visit in 2015 lists, which makes me very excited. But I think just having more advocates in Cleveland spread the word will do a lot.
That's great. We love having you as our cheerleader.
Yeah.
So, thank you. Scott, did you have a response?
I don't think so. I actually let both these guys who are a little closer to the situation speak to that.
Thank you. So I think we're going to make a transition now.
Indeed we will. Thank you very much, Deb. I'm Dan Multhrop, Chief Executive here at the City Club. Today we're enjoying a Friday forum featuring this panel discussion called Millennials and Entrepreneurship, a conversation about engaging the next generation, featuring Lena Kelly, a Venture for America Fellow and Digital Storyteller at BoxCast, Dr. Scott Shane, the Professor of Entrepreneurial Studies at Case Western Reserve University and a newly installed Research Fellow at Burton D. Morgan, Andrew Yang, founder and CEO of Venture for America and soon to be a Presidential Fellow of something awesome, and Deb Hoover, who's moderating. Deb is the President and CEO of the Burton D. Morgan Foundation. We're going to get to the Q&A in a moment, and we encourage you to organize your questions for our panelists now and ask that your questions be brief and to the point and, in fact, questions. We welcome all of you here and those joining us via our primary media partner, that's 90.3 WCPN, WVIZ, PBS, 104.9 WCLV Idea Stream, or one of the many other radio stations across the region and country that carry City Club programs. Television broadcasts of the City Club are made possible by Cleveland State University and PNC. Our live webcast is supported by the University of Akron. Be sure to join us on Friday, May 19th, as the City Club welcomes Erica Groshin. She's Commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It's part of our Business Leader Series. For more information about that or any of our upcoming and past forums, please visit us online at cityclub.org. Today's program is part of our Startups at the City Club series, sponsored by the Longview Foundation and Drummond Road Capital. We thank you very much for your support. Today's program is also the Cyrus Eaton Memorial Forum, made possible by a special gift from the Cyrus Eaton Foundation. We thank you for your support. Our community partner for today's program is the Ohio Venture Association. Thanks for your help. And we welcome guests at tables hosted by OVA and by the Burton D. Morgan Foundation. Now it's time for the City Club traditional Q&A period. We welcome questions from everyone, members and guests alike. Holding our microphones today are City Club volunteer Spencer Kiesel and Director of Programming Stephanie Jansky. Our first question, please.
I think business schools, and increasingly you begin to look like a very savvy, field-oriented kind of a business school. Business schools have practically come to the point of requiring that people do something other than go to school for a while before they come to be further seasoned and taught to be good businessmen and businesswomen and managers. Are you going to find, do you think, as you look at your candidates, you really want people to spend some time groping around, probably working for someone else, before they leap into your entrepreneurship program?
And we didn't talk about this at length, but most entrepreneurs are actually, as you say, more seasoned and mature. I think the average age nationally is something like, you can correct me on this, but I think it's like 42, 43, something along those lines. So the notion of like the college dorm room entrepreneur really is very misleading. It's very much an outlier. To your question, most entrepreneurs are seasoned in the business world. That said, on the flip side, entrepreneurship is a process that you can get better at and develop at over time. And even our most famous successful entrepreneurs generally crashed and burned a couple times before they made it. So you think about Bill Gates and Microsoft. How many of you knew that Bill Gates started a failed company called Trafo Data before he started Microsoft? You know, a couple of the entrepreneurs in the room. So there's something also to be said for having a young person get some experiences under their belt and develop and get stronger. Certainly, after my company flopped, I learned a lot. So to your question, I think business schools have incredible value in certain ways, and we don't think that we're right for everyone. But we do think that there are some people that would prefer 2 years at a company on the ground without the indebtedness. I would have much less issue with business school if it were free. But if you load up on $100K in educational loans and spend 2 years, it tends to constrain your postgraduate choices. If you look at what people do after business school, they tend to work for very large companies in high salaried positions. So again, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, but they're fulfilling a certain value proposition, and we think that it's not necessarily helping early stage companies that might not be able to afford that kind of hire.
Yes, for the panel, I was just wondering, I imagine a lot of would-be young entrepreneurs are the first generation children of immigrants who've come to this country and really want to take advantage of its opportunities and hit the ground running. Have you seen that this is true?
It seems like a data. I mean, I've got an answer.
Yeah, this to me is another example of kind of what the media likes to focus its attention on, because the rate at which immigrants start businesses overall is slightly higher right now than those of non-immigrants, and it tends to flip-flop from year to year. The numbers are very close, and a lot of this also depends on immigrants from where and in what industries you're looking at. I don't think that it's I don't think any of this is a pattern specific to whether people were native born or they are immigrants. I'm not sure it's so much of an issue of the business schools or not business schools. I think there's something going on that's more fundamental that lies at the level of what people are choosing to both study in college and what their aspirations are when they go, so that understanding and fixing this, if you think it's a problem, are getting at this when we're talking about people when they're 17, 18 years old.
Thanks for coming. We've all read about inequality in our economy, Piketty and others. What do you think about the issue of entrepreneurship being only for the upper middle class and above? Does entrepreneurship apply to the people who have not made it to the middle class?
So you probably have data on this too. I'll just say that that the correlation between interest in entrepreneurship and one's family resources tends to be pretty strong in my experience, where you'd like to think that there are all these hard scrabble, first in their family to go to college, people that then want to start companies, but most of them actually are thinking, hey, I'm the first in my family to go to college, I need to freaking make sure the family's going to be okay and that their sacrifices are meaningful. So the people that tend to be interested in entrepreneurship have a little bit more of a cushion and some family resources. I'd actually be fascinated to hear what the data is on that.
So one of the things, and I think there's a hypothesis out there that is the heart of what you're getting at, and it turns out that the tendency of people to start businesses has a curvilinear relationship with income. If you're really poor, you're much more likely to do it, and in part that's because you don't have very good alternatives in terms of jobs. At the higher level of income, it's also much more likely that people start businesses, in part because people who have billion-dollar ideas also tend to have access to other things as well, which is more common among people who are wealthy. Where we see a big decline is in the middle class. And so some people have a hypothesis that the hollowing out of the middle class, right, moving in both directions, is part of the problem with the decline overall in some aspects of entrepreneurial activity in general. Whether that applies specifically to young people, nobody knows.
I knew that making my kid feel poor would pay dividends.
I have a sort of trickle-up, trickle-down question. So as the mother of a 13-year-old who is looking at high schools now and only will consider high schools with an entrepreneurial program, and his friends are the same way, and a lot of what they talk about is how do we start a lemonade stand, so it feels like they've been indoctrinated. So do you think that this sort of thinking and discussion we're having now is going down to younger folks, and are we going to see sort of a boom in entrepreneurial activity? And then the trickle-up question is, as a person who is interested in workforce development, is there data or do you have anecdotal evidence that shows that people who engage in entrepreneurial activity can also participate in more traditional workforce activities and be successful?
So I've seen various youth-oriented entrepreneurship programs and initiatives, and the primary outcome seems to be that they get much more interested in going to college, which is great. I take that as a freaking huge win. That's what I've seen, at least. I'm going to throw this to the academics.
But absolutely. So there's a lot of evidence that people, when they're young, and high school kids, and even younger than high school kids, that when they go into these programs, they get better at many things. They're more likely to go to college, absolutely, as Andrew said. Also, they understand money and the role of money in the economy in a way they didn't before. One of the big things about these lemonade stand programs is to know that money isn't just something that your parents hand you, right? And that's, as anybody, I'm a parent of a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old, and I can tell you that that's a really important thing to impart when you're the one with the wallet they're going into. And so that idea, I think, is really important, those programs. The other thing is, and I think if I didn't hear it, the gender of the child there, but particularly important are actually girls as opposed to boys. One of the things that the data shows is that the programs are particularly important to get girls interested in following down a road towards a career, not just as entrepreneurs, but in business and, frankly, in STEM activities in general. They're very helpful in breaking gender stereotypes that the kids somehow internalize. So, I mean, whether or not they do something later there for entrepreneurship, I don't think it really matters. They're just great for society.
Yeah, they're pluses for things besides entrepreneurship. I mean, to echo Deb's opening, like the advent of entrepreneurship education really hasn't resulted in an increase in business formation. If anything, they actually have negative relationships thus far. This business formation has gone down, like literally like 140,000 businesses fewer getting started per year. So on that level, I'm honestly not very optimistic, but I love the initiatives and programs because I think they lead to many good things.
And I would echo that with the programs that we fund through the foundation. We fund entrepreneurship education for all, second graders on up through high school, and we think that exposure is really important, building that entrepreneurial mindset that can be applied whatever a student ends up doing.
Also, going into school, I kind of thought my two options were, I'm the daughter of two lawyers, so nothing against lawyers, I can't have anything. But my options were either to go to law school or to go to med school. So I think to have entrepreneurship introduced to me at a younger age, that puts it on the table as an option much sooner in life. So then you kind of go through all your other experiences knowing that that's an option for you too. So it'll change your outlook.
Fascinating discussion. Thank you so much. I work a lot with female entrepreneurs, so my two questions are related to that. Dr. Shane, do you have any data today how it looks for female entrepreneurs? We heard that some of the numbers are going down in terms of the number of businesses started, but is there a trend that maybe you could reference in terms of female entrepreneurs? And then my question for Andrew and Lena, what do you think we can do to help women to start businesses? They might have some special challenges.
So I wish that I could stand here and tell you that the trends are good, but one of the things that is one of the most troubling consistent statistics that we see in entrepreneurship is that going back about 25 years, the rate at which women start businesses is roughly half the rate of men, and it hasn't budged. It's pretty much the same percentage, right? So whatever we've done is thrown at the problem, hasn't solved it because the patterns haven't changed. Now, what people have found as they look at the pattern is you see the problem emerging in large part because of choices and preferences. So you go back and you ask, do you want to start a business? And you go and find women saying no at a higher rate than men. You go back to college students and you ask that question, and you find that male college students much more likely to want to start businesses than female college students. You go back to high school, you see that as well. You have to go all the way back to grade school, okay, before you don't have that problem in the data. So something is happening, right, when you start to see kids who are 11 and 12 years old. That's where the interest in entrepreneurship is shifting by gender, right? And so if you want to solve it, right, you got to do something there, because that's where the pattern starts.
So Venture for America's cohort this year will be about 45% women. We have a women's initiative. We're focusing on it. To me, again, it's role models, mentoring, resources. I think it's more difficult. Well, women actually start businesses a whole lot. It's just that they tend to start businesses that don't grow past certain points, and also are less likely to get investment, in part because 80% of angel investors are men. And not to say, I think there's probably a relationship there, honestly. So there are a set of structural obstacles, and at Venture for America, we're going to tackle each one of them and see to it that if Lena or Mukja or other women in the program want to start a business, they'll be able to do so, because I feel strongly about that.
I think the biggest thing for me is just to see other women who are successful in the field. So my mom, as a lawyer, didn't have any female role models. She was the first lawyer or female lawyer at her company. So if the data hasn't budged since when she was my age to now, I'm hoping that as she's kind of emerging into this role model figure for younger people, we can now start to see the changes happening now that kind of the pioneers are there. So hopefully they're kind of clearing the path and more can come follow.
I'm interested in how these lessons translate into the low-income communities where I work and live, particularly thinking about 18-year-old graduating high school and looking at 4 years in a lot of debt, or going to work somewhere and gaining experience and then being able to start a business in a relatively short amount of time. Can you talk a little bit about how the lessons that you've learned would translate into low-income entrepreneurship?
So on our side, our fellows are diverse socioeconomically. Some come from, very hard-scrabble, disadvantaged backgrounds. Others are quite affluent. The goal with Venture for America, if we could take all 1,600 applicants, we would obviously. But then our resources end up getting funneled towards people that we think have certain attributes. And our goal, speaking just personally, it's that. My goal is that everyone has access to an opportunity that's like a step up or a leg up. And so it could be that some people a certain opportunity would be like a great one for them that's not starting a business, and that's what we should try and give them. For other people, if they have the opportunity to start a business, we should give them the resources they need. But the issues you're talking about are also like things that pain me and other people, just in that they're I'm friendly with Dan Gilbert, who's another Venture for America supporter, and he went after this issue, spent millions of dollars, and the results were uneven / inconclusive. So there are foundations we work with, they're the same way. We all want to try and address this issue. We have to attack it with every tool that we have. So I don't really have great insight for you. I'm sorry about that.
I have the microphone in my hand. So first, an on-point thread that that should not be interpreted as a shameless plug. For women in the room, I'm a mentor at an organization called Merge Lane, which was founded by two extremely good female entrepreneurs for female entrepreneurs. It's an accelerator that specifically connects them with angels and mentors. My question is for Dr. Shane. The question is, you seem to be suggesting earlier on that small business creation is not a good proxy for measuring entrepreneurial activity. And I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth. And if that's the case, I'm wondering if you might have a suggestion on what would be a better proxy for measuring entrepreneurial activity if small business creation isn't it.
I guess I'm not saying that small business creation isn't a good proxy for entrepreneurial activity. It's that the term entrepreneurial activity means lots of different things to different people. And so that when you add up and look at aggregate statistics, most of what's in that data are small businesses, because most businesses are small and stay small. Right? So when we talk about the data, that's what we're talking about. Right? Small business activity in the US has declined a lot over time. Small business activity, starting small businesses, is particularly low among young people compared to a generation ago. Whether or not you want to use that as a measure for other kinds of entrepreneurial activity, I would say probably not, because if they're two different things, you don't want to use one to try to measure the other. If what you care about is high-tech startups in Cleveland or Silicon Valley or wherever it is, measuring all businesses is probably not the way to get the answer to that.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the insights. I have a question just for the panel. Been a lot of talk about student loans, come up a couple times. And I was born the last week of 1980, so I'm about 5 days away from being a millennial. Yeah, I'm still dealing with student loans, and I think that is a big deterrent. I've heard of other programs for education majors, if they go and teach in certain neighborhoods, that they have debt forgiveness. Given the fact that entrepreneurship leads to job creation, Are there any initiatives to get some sort of similar forgiveness programs available to entrepreneurs?
Student indebtedness is a huge issue. I mean, I think we're up to like 1.1 trillion. If we don't think that's discouraging new business formation and risk taking, we're on another planet. Like Venture for America, we had one donor. You guys, so if anyone has this idea, so they said if someone starts a business in Rhode Island, we will pay their educational loans. And so if someone wants to take that on here in Northeast Ohio, we'd love that. I'm sure there are going to be some fellows that would take advantage of that. But it's a real issue. I had law school debt for years and years. It did not evaporate. When you stop being a lawyer, the debt's still there. It's funny that way. So I feel your pain, man. I used to call it my mistress because I was like sending it checks every month. And I just like imagine like I was like, this could feed a family.
So we're getting close to the end of our time together. Do we have time for one more question? Okay. I'm sorry. I think our panelists will be available afterwards for you to ask your question maybe directly to them. So today at the City Club, we have been enjoying a Friday forum featuring a panel discussion on millennials and entrepreneurship, a conversation about engaging the next generation. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is now adjourned.